Supplemental math videos from Circle Christian School. Factoring polynomials. Look for the difference of two squares. My most favorite quadratic equation to factor. There he comes. Okay, when we factor out, what we're doing is looking for the greatest common factor. And in doing so, it's still kind of that number to number thing and letter to letter. So we check out the numbers, and I usually go to the smallest number to see if there's not something that can be factored out. And looking at my other numbers, I see I can take a 3 out. And then I look at the letters, and I go to the one with the lowest power, which is going to be the x. As long as they all have an x, we could take an x out. And the next thing I'm going to do is anytime we have a leading coefficient, the guy up front is a negative, we're going to factor out the negative also. Okay, so basically I'm taking a negative 3x out of the negative 12x4, but I work a little bit backwards and go, what did I multiply to the negative 3 to get a negative 12? And that would be a positive 4. And what did I multiply to the x to get x to the 4th power? That'd be an x to the 3. Now, because I'm dividing out a negative to everybody, all my signs are actually going to change here. So what I multiply to a negative 3 to get the 6 would be a negative 2, and an x to the 2nd power to get the x3. And so the result is going to be, let's see, another sign change here. This is going to be x, that's what would give me an x to the 2nd power, and plus a 10. Okay, you can always double check your work by just distributing back and seeing if you got the same result here as what you started out with. All we're doing is really just going backwards. All right, when we factor a quadratic equation, that is something with the power 2, we always look to see what's happening up front. Standard form of a quadratic equation, ax to the 2nd power plus bx plus c. And these are the ones where a equals 1. See, there's a 1 there. And this is just the doubly bubbly time. We're going to have 2 bubbles here. And you look pretty much at the x. What did it take to get an x squared if you FOILed them out? And an x. And then I take a look at the last number here. What did it take to get a 6, which would be 6 times 1, or 2 times 3? And I'm going to pick the 2 times 3 because when we add those together, it gives us the middle number, the b, which is 5. Okay, on the next one here, you'll notice it has a negative 1 to it. So what I'm going to do, like I did up top, is actually factor out the negative, which means all the signs are just going to change here. Minus 12. And so we have a negative, and since now it is a equals 1 again, just going to do the double bubble thing again. We're going to get an x and an x, because if we multiply it together, it gives us that little x squared there. And factors for a 12, which we know is 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And we're looking for ones that will result in some way with either a 1, in this case a positive 1, so a positive 4 and a negative 3, add them together gives us that positive 1, and of course multiplied together equals the negative 12. What we're doing is just walking backwards. We're trying to find the 2 binomials that we multiplied together to give us the quadratic equation. And just like we had special binomial products, it would just go to figure that we have special binomial factors. The first one is the 2-second one, where we had the difference of 2 squares, and the double bubble is pretty easy here. You get an x, you get an x. square root of the first guy, we have to square root the second guy, just walking backwards again, which is going to be 7 and 7, and we have that little plus minus thing. You have to be a little bit careful when you've got something other than a power 2 here. You have to remember to factor completely, and so we're going to get an x and an x squared, square root of the first guy, and then we're going to square root the second guy, which is going to be 9 and 9. And we get that little plus and we get that little minus. Haha, but we're not done yet. Be very careful because within your answer you have another special binomial factor, another 2-second difference of 2 squares with the minus sign here. So it's going to result in its own little double bubble. Square root of the first one, square root, and square root of the second one, our little plus minus things, and we just bring down the one with the plus sign. So x squared plus 9. It doesn't have a special thing because it has a plus sign to it. Only the guys with the minus sign, the difference of 2 squares. Difference of 2 squares. Square here, square here. Minus sign in between, difference. And then we have the 5-second ones, the binomial squared. Sometimes these are a little harder to recognize, but default method would be to, just do the double bubble or factor by grouping, which is on the next video, factor by grouping. But I notice here I got a perfect square at the front, a perfect square at the back. And so I'm going to try that for my double bubble first and see if that doesn't give me my middle number, which it does twice right here. Cool. Try another one here. Going to do the x and the x. Seeing that I have a perfect square at the back, the 36, and do a 6 and a 6. Yes, that works good because when we add 6x and 6x together, we do get a 12. But because it has a minus in front of it, we know it's the binomial squared here, which would result in x plus 5 squared, and then here x minus 6 squared. We're just walking backwards here. Okay, now for the one that takes a little bit more work to it because a, the leading coefficient, does not equal 1, which we see right here. It does not equal 1 because it equals 6, obviously. That we have to do our factor by grouping. Factor by grouping. So some of you may be experts at being the double bubble trial and error. It is not my way to go and do these. I need to have a process and have some black and white. It's great default method. So what we're going to do is actually take our a, our coefficient at the front, and our constant number at the back, and multiply them together. So I have a 6 and a negative 2, and that's going to equal a negative 12, and we're going to have to find factors for a negative 12 that when we add them together gives us a negative 1. Negative 1 right here. So I'm going to go through a list of factors for negative 12. We have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and the 3 and the 4. Okay, remembering that one of these would have to be a negative number to give us that negative 12 to begin with. And we're going to pick the 3 and the 4. And since it has to be added to equal our b here, negative 1, the 4 is going to be the negative and the 3 is going to be the positive. All right, so we're going to branch down here and put a positive 3x minus a 4x. What we're doing is taking it back to the FOILed form. So this is the FOILed form when you multiplied all the things out and you had the middle part that you added together. And I'm just going to bring everybody else down. So 6x squared minus the 2. I'm going to factor by grouping. I'm going to make some groups. So I'm going to group the first part, group the second part. Make sure you keep the sign inside the middle here, very important. And we're going to factor out the greatest common factor between both of the groups. So on my first one, I know I can take a 3 and an x out. That's going to leave me with 2x plus 1. And again, I just kind of multiply back to double check here. And then I'm going to bring my minus sign down. And the greatest common factor in the next group would be a 2. And this is the cool part, that the second guy here always has to match the first one that we had. These little guys end up being twins. And so our first factor, first binomial factor, is going to be the twins, 2x plus 1. And the second binomial is going to be the guys that are left over, the 3x and the negative 2. And so we have 3x minus the 2. All right, and we can always double check that by just foiling everything back. So if I foil my things back, I get a 6x squared and a negative 4x. Notice how this is looking a lot like what we had up here, so that we could factor by grouping. And the next one here gets multiplied to everybody inside, so we get a positive 3x and the negative 2. And when we put the guys on the inside here together, combine our like terms, we get what we started with, 6x squared minus x minus a 2. And we're back where we started again. So go enjoy your day, get a big bucket full of sudsy, bubbly soap, and wash your mother's car.